talking about organizing your board meeting minutes. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would it be important to keep track of the board meeting minutes? Well, it's actually very important because it keeps a record of both the short and long term planning that you're doing during these board meetings. Now, if you ever needed to get a loan or get audited, people may ask you to see these meeting minutes to see what was discussed during certain meetings about was the loan approved by the board of directors. There's all sorts of different things that can happen during these meeting minutes, and it's so important that you have a record of it. So we're going to dive in today about the best way to organize it and make sure that you're keeping everything up to date. Now, before starting the meeting, it's always a good idea to have your notes planned out ahead of time. If this is the first time you've done this, you definitely want to make sure that you have some sort of format laid out ahead of time. I use a Google Doc that I just copy and paste each of the board meeting minutes onto the next and just change the details of the meeting, but the headings stay the same. So of course you want to have the date, time, and place of the meeting, where it's being held. If it's being held virtually, you definitely want to make a note of that. You also want to mention who is attending the meeting. For any board meetings, I always create an agenda ahead of time. I also use that when creating my meeting notes because conversations are happening, things are going super fast, so it helps me keep track of everything while I'm trying to take notes, as well as the topics, dates, times, everything that's happening. But one thing that you might give some thought to, if you have the option, is to record the meeting. That way, when you go back to transcribe the notes, you're able to get all the details right at the time that you're transcribing everything. You definitely want to make sure that you are notating any details, discussions that are happening on any specific projects or things that need to be detailed out. That's super important because you have to remember and also think that if someone was coming back 2 years later to look at these meeting notes, would they understand exactly what we were talking about just seeing these notes, not listening to the recording? Now, if there's a specific project that has a massive discussion around it, you definitely want to make sure that you're notating the main pillar points of that conversation, but also who might be for or against either side of that discussion, because in the end, once the motion is made, you want to document who voted on what and how many yeses versus how many nos. Here are a few additional items that you want to make sure that are in your board meeting minutes if they apply. You want to make sure that if there's any corrections or amendments from previous meeting minutes, that those are notated as well. If someone has a last minute addition to the agenda that you'd previously sent out, you also want to make note of that, make sure that that gets scheduled into the current agenda. This one's really important. You want to make sure that your quorum is met. So if you're not familiar what that means you have a certain number of people required to attend the meeting in order to approve or allow decisions to be made. That information is detailed in your company bylaws, and if you're not familiar with that, you want to make sure that you take a look at it before the meeting. Of course, you want to notate any motions or rejections. Specifically, if there's any voting that's happening, so who made the motion, who seconded it, and all those in favor. Or if there was any abstains or nays. You want to talk about any actions that are going to be taken or actions that are going to be taken in the future. Also, any next steps in relation to any projects that you're discussing. Any items that need to be held over or discussed for the following meeting. Any new business as well as open discussion, or if there's any last minute adjustments that need to be made to any project or anything that was mentioned throughout the meeting. Another one is also to mention the next meeting date, time, and place. Just like you noted the time that the meeting started, you also want to note the time that the meeting ended or adjourned. So for each agenda item that you discussed during this meeting, you want to write a short statement of action that was taken by the board along with a brief explanation of the rationale for their decision. If there is an excessive amount of discussion, make sure that you keep that succinct and clear. Gotta remember, someone might be coming to look back at these meeting notes far after this meeting, and you want to make sure that it's easy to understand and clear and concise. You want to make sure that you're recording these discussions objectively. You want to avoid putting your own spin on it. And if there is a heated discussion, make sure that you try to keep that as neutral as possible. A good way to do this is by avoiding adjectives or adverbs. Like I mentioned earlier, board meeting minutes can be used in all legal forms. So you want to make sure that you've taken down everything accurately and clear and concise and unambiguous as possible. Because the board has legal liabilities, you want to make sure that the information is basic and the language is clear and easy to understand, so you avoid any legal complications if for some reason these notes were ever used in a court of law. Make sure too that if you need to go back and review these meeting minutes, you do that as soon as the meeting is over. Don't wait, because you might forget key items that were discussed, and if you're not able to record the meeting, you want to make sure that you get them taken care of right away. Make sure before you distribute the meeting minutes to your board of directors, check and make sure that there's not an approval process that you need to go through in order to have them approved before distribution. If it's just you, a company by yourself, that's not necessary. But if it's for a bigger corporation or a bigger group of people, you want to make sure that if there is an approval process needed, that you get that taken care of. Now, once the meeting minutes are completed, we need to talk about storage. If your company already has a plan, that's great. Just follow that. But if you're a solo entrepreneur or someone that's just starting out with a brand new corporation, let me tell you about the way that I do it, and hopefully that will help you in the future. I store all of our recordings in Dropbox, done by month. It makes the organization super easy, and then when I've wrapped up one month, I'll go and I'll create a new folder for the following month. That way it's ready to go and I can just drop the recording in. Now I'll also take a PDF of those meeting minutes and I'll also drop it into that same Dropbox folder, so everything is in a place where I know it's at. That way, in case anybody ever needs a copy of it, I have quick and easy access to it. Now, if you're in a situation where you prefer paper, you can also do this with a binder. So you can get a separate binder that has January through December tabs and place all of your meeting minutes within that binder. Now, if you do have recordings, you can always copy that Dropbox link into the meeting notes so you have it handy, so you still have access to that recording if anybody should need it, but it's in the meeting notes all the way at the bottom. So those are a couple different options in regards to meeting notes. I hope that helped you. If it did, please let me know. Let's connect over on Instagram and chat more about it.